Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next video. This video, we have in the previous video, we were building on from our events application that we are creating to allow us to add an event to an admin to add an event to a table. So the main task of what we're meant to do is create an events application that allows an admin to add to. We've created an event class, and then we've is our the database, and to write to the database, delete from the data. I've gone ahead and done look like. So this was going to look like, I'm going to have the name, I'm going to have an event time, I'm going to have the event information, the event venue. So somebody when a person loads it, the admin will be able to delete from it, they'll be able to update it, they'll be able to add to it from the same activity. So all I've done is I've added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 buttons. I've added edit texts and text views just to be on that page, and then current ID. So if you're following this tutorial, you will need to do the same. You can put the buttons wherever you want to put it. You can put it on top of each other. You can put side by side. I've done it this way because it's easier for me. Okay, so now let's get to it in our main activity .java. Okay, so what the plan is to do, looking at the interface, is when the person clicks, this button is meant to say load. When the person clicks load, what it should do is it should load up one event in there. And when we click on next, we'll be going through like a list, and we'll be showing the new list. If we add onto an event name, it would update the name automatically. It will update the name when you click on update database as well. So this is what we currently have. So first we're going to do is we need to create an array. We need to create a list. And the reason why we need to create a list is because remember that when we first created, when we created our get all from the database, we were using an array list, a list to be able to work with that. So we have an event list that I'm going to be creating. I'm going to import a list class. So I've imported the list class. I'm also going to create an instance of the SQLite helper. Well, in my case, I didn't call it SQL, I call it DB Connect. So DB Connect DB. And then what I'm going to do, so int current position. So that current position will help us to know which position we're currently in. We might not use it, we might use it, but for able to set that int current position. My PC's because I think my emulator is running. So I'm gonna set my current position to 0. I will explain to you why I need all of this. For now, let's go into our onCreate method just to attach handlers to our elements. So first one we need is the text view. So the ID, the txt ID. Let's find view by ID r.id. We can do txt ID. So this is our ID for each row. And then I need to find the edit text for the rest of them. So edt name equals find view by ID r.id. At this stage, all we're doing is we are getting, we are attaching handlers to our our views or components and our layout. So event time equals find view by ID r.id, and then find the event time. Let me just to be a bit quicker, let me just copy this and change this to event information. Let me change this to event venue, and then change this also to event information, and change this to event venue as well. Okay, so I have found all my edit texts. Now, next thing I need to do is find all my buttons. So button btn add equals find view by ID r.id.btn add. And then next thing we're going to have is just to find the rest of the other buttons. So we have a btn add, we have a btn next, we have a btn previous, we have a btn update, we have a btn delete. I'll change the rest of them as well. We have a btn clear, which would clear any information that we have currently. We have a btn view all, which when we click on, we'll be able to view all of it. So let's just change this to btn add. If we go to our activity, so we have btn next, btn update. Okay, so that's already done. So btn add, btn next, btn previous, btn update, btn delete, btn clear, and then btn view all. So this is what we have so far. We've managed to attach handlers to our button. If you're wondering what the find view by ID is, it's similar to you if you're creating websites, document.getElement by ID, because whenever we give an ID to our view or components, it's stored in a resource folder. That's what the R stands for. And then we're looking for the IDs, and we're looking for whatever ID we gave that component. So in this case, what we're going to do next is I'm going to create a new DB with the DB that I created. I'm going to set it to the SQLite. Well, in this case is DB connect, and then the context is this. So it's going to run in this context. And then what I'm going to do now is my events list that I've created, I'm going to set that event list to actually to the db.getAll. So what's going to happen is that list that I'm getting from the database is going to go straight into the event list because it's already a list already. And the next thing I'm going to do is the position is already set to 0. So we'll keep that there, or we can just update it here because I think we need to update it here, current position. Now, the reason I have current position is because remember that when you're dealing with arrays or when you're dealing with any positioning, it always starts from 0. So this 0 that we're looking at, I would explain to you later on. But the first thing we want to do is we don't just want to run our code because we want to check to make sure there's something actually inside our address book list, because you can't load something if you don't have an address list. So what we're going to do is I'm going to check if that address, if the events list dot size is greater than 0, do something, because we want to make sure that our event list actually has events inside. We don't want to open up a list which has nothing inside of it. But before we do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a load data method, which obviously we're going to be using that quite frequent, so that when we click on load data, we don't have to keep repeating ourselves, because we're going to use that load data. We're going to have to load the data in each and every single one. Each time we click on next, it loads a new data, because what we're doing is we're loading first on the list, second on the list, third on the list. So when you click on next, we're actually incrementing the list by 1, if that makes sense. Let's say, for example, we have 20 items in the list. Whenever we click on next, what we're doing is we're increasing it. So it starts from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to be loading that data quite frequent. So we want to create a method which we'll be able to use that for. So when we create that method, whenever we create that load data, we want to set the current position to a 0. And then what we want to do is, actually, let's not do the current position now. What we want to do is we want to find that txt. We want to create a text view, txt ID, and then we want to find our view by ID in here again by txt ID. So what we're doing is we're trying to find that text view. So whenever we find that text view, what would actually happen is we'll be able to set that txt to whatever we want to set it to, really. So let's say, for example, we have our txt, we have our edit text, we have our edit phone number. So let's do it this way. Let me get this thing again. Now this code can be made shorter, but for the moment, if I make it shorter and you don't understand it, it would be confusing for you. So I'll go through this process again and again and again until you're able to understand this. So what I'm doing now is whenever we click load data, what we're going to do is I'm actually going to load the information from that list to that text view. So imagine whenever we click on load data, we have a text view, and that text view, you want to get that text view, you want to get the event name, want to get the event time, want to get the event information, want to get the event venue. And what we're going to do is txt ID equals, or txt ID dot set the text. So because what we're going to do is we're going to set the text to whatever the ID is in that list, that current position that we are currently at. So it will be integer. The reason we're using integer, because remember, our toString, our integers are in our database. When we created that object, that event object, remember that the integers are always ID. The IDs are integers. So what we're going to do here is we're going to call our events list, and we're going to say events list dot get. And then what we're going to do is in our load data, we are going to pass in a number. So that number is basically the current position. So let's say, for example, in our list, we have 25 items in our list. When the person clicks on next, at the moment it's at 0. So that 0 will go through that data and it will populate that. So in our case, let's say we have get, let's pass in C there, and then we can say get the ID. So what that happens is, if our current position is 0 and we click on the next, it changes this number to a 1. So what that happens is we'll get whatever, let's say list number 2, item number 2. If we change it to a 3, it will get item number 4. If we change it to a 5, we'll get item number 6. If we change it to a 6, we'll get item number 6. That's what we're doing. We're working with that next and previous button. All that does is just increments. So it's almost as if we're going through one by one in our list and just displaying that. That's all we're doing. So txt, we've done the txt one. Now I want to do the edte name, event name. Again, same thing. We want to get our event lists, and then we want to say dot get, pass in the C, and then get that event name. Let's see why it's giving us an error, because I haven't actually done the set text. So in case you're confused with what I'm doing is I have a list. My event list now has all the rows from the database. So it's a list, because remember when we created it, when we created the array list in our events.java in this DB Connect, what we did was we created items. We created a list, and that list now holds that list. What's in that list is items. So we have item 1, item 0, item 1, item 2, item 3, item 4, item 5, item 6, item 7, item 8, item 9, item 10, item 11, item 12. So in our list, so our event list now has all of those items. So we have item 1, item 0, item 1, item 2, item 3. And we use integers to go through them. So if the person changes the number from 0 to a 1, it will just go on to whatever's in item 2. It will go to 3, it will go to 4, it will go to 5, it will go to 6. And then we'll just be displaying that information that is in that list to our edit text. But I'm just creating this in a method so that it's easier for us to use it over and over and over again. So we've got event information, we have events, event time, then we'll have event venue, and then I'll just change this to get event information, get event time, and get event venue. So this is what we currently have. So whenever we click on load, whenever the load data method is called, what it's doing is we're just going to be loading whatever position that we currently are in, and then we'll be able to see. Now, let's go to, let's say, for example, I want to show you how it works. So let's go all the way to the top again. We've got a method. We'll be creating several methods, by the way. So the first thing we're doing right now is we're checking if the event list is greater than 0, which means that we actually have something inside our events list. what we want to do is we want to load data. But what is the first item that we want to load? We want to load the current position, which is at the moment is set to 0. Because remember, whenever we click on next, it's going to increment that current position from 0 to a 1. So again, imagine we have 20 items in our list. Whenever we click on load data, we want to load the first one. However, when we click on the next button, that variable that is 0 might change to a 1. So that next button will go to 2, 3, 4. And when we click previous, it will subtract it. So it's coming down. It's coming down. It's like having minus and plus, minus and plus, minus and plus. So this would help us. So the next thing we're going to do is when the user click on button view all, what do we want to happen? Well, when the user click on button view all, well, let's not use button view all for now. Button view all will be something that we will use later on because we want to view everything in a list rather than in this format that we're using, we're working with. So let's say we want to sort out a button next, just so that you're not confused. So btn.set on click listener. An on click listener it will listen for when a button is clicked. So do something when the button is clicked. We're just adding an action to our button. So when our button is clicked, the first we want to do is we want to load data and current position. But think about it. When you click on next, we want to actually increment our current position. Because remember, the current position currently is equals to 0. If we click on next, we want to now go to the next item on the list. So what we need to do is we need to now change that current position into a 1, into a 2, into a 3. So to do that, all we have to do is just increment that current position. So when I click on next, if it's at 0, it goes to 2. If it's at 3, it goes to 4. If it's at 4, it goes to 5. If it's at 5, it will go to 6. If it's at 6, it will go to 7. So that's what we're doing with the current position. But it's not as straightforward as possible, because think about it in this way. If we have 10 items on the list and then we pass 10, what would happen? Our application will crash. So what we need to do is we need to check if the current position is greater or equals to 1 and the current position is less than our event list, then increment it. Then our event list size, then increment it. Because what this does is we're just putting a check to make sure that we never actually get to the point of our application crashing because you've gone out of range. You've got a list which only has 10 items, but you've incremented to 12. Your application will crash. So that is what the button add does. So all we're doing, like I said, is we're just changing the current position of our list item. So if you click on next, add, it increments that current position by 1. And remember, that current position is what we're using in the load data. So let's imagine here is 0. Once we click on it, becomes a 1. It means that it would set all the text of whatever we have here to a list, to the next item. So again, similar to the same thing to the button button previous. Actually, this is meant to be button next, not button add. Button next, and this should be button previous. So now button previous, again, similar to the same thing, but in this case, we want to decrement it. There are other ways of how you can do this, but I'm just doing it this way. If this makes sense to you, I hope it really helps you. So what we have here is we now have a button next, and then we also have a button previous. Now we know definitely for sure that we can actually loop through our lists of rows that we have, our list of events. So the admin will be able to update, edit, delete. So now let's work on adding. So btn add dot set on click listener, new view on click listener. And what we're going to do now is we are now going to check, so string ID equals txt ID dot get text dot to string. Now, what do we want to do? Well, we only want to add a new item, we only want to add to the database if the user is not loading anything. Because think about it in a scenario where the person is trying to add, but the fields are already populated. So if you go back to our app here, what we have here, what we want to do is, if the person right now, there's nothing inside name, event time, event information, event venue. So how do we now tell if the user is loading something or is not loading? What I'm using, always set the current ID to a number. So if you look in our load data method, we actually display in the current ID of the is, we have to check if it's empty, if that's if the name is empty and the phone number is empty, it means that the user is obviously trying to add something to the database or something that doesn't exist. We want to first check that thing. The second thing we also want to make sure is that if the ID currently is nothing, is empty, then it obviously means that obviously all the other fields are also empty. So that's the check that we put into place. So we do string and we do name. Well, it's not event name equals edt event name dot toString dot get text dot toString. I repeat the same step. So event information, event time, edt event time, edt event venue. So what we have here currently right now is we have an event name, event information, event time, event venue. What we're going to do is I'm going to check if the name is empty, if the event name, dot is empty, and event information dot is empty, and event time, I believe, is empty. If the event time is empty, what we want to do is we want to let the user know that, listen, all fields are required. You cannot submit into the database. So this, all fields are required. And then toast dot length dot shorts dot show. Yeah. So it's just going to check that these fields are not empty. We want to make sure that the user is not trying to add an empty item to the database. And next thing we want to check is we want to make sure that what the user actually entered is not adding something already exists. Because if that txt ID already has an ID, is set to an ID, it means that obviously the user is currently viewing existing events. But if it's empty, it means that obviously the user is trying to add something. So if ID dot is empty, if the ID is empty, we want to create a new event object. So event equals new, let me just call this E1, new event. We can pass in the event name, we can pass in the event. What is it meant to be? Okay. Okay. What we really should have done in our events.java is not to add the ID. And the reason for that is because the ID is something that is done by auto increment. Actually, that is fine. That is absolutely fine. Just need to have a look at how we have created it. So yes, so what we're doing is completely fine. It's just we'll just need to create a new one because the one we're using previously in our events.java has the ID. So we just need to create a new constructor without the ID because we actually need one with the ID. So let's go to constructor. Let's select everything apart from our ID because that ID at the point of adding, the ID becomes an auto increment. So what we have is event name. We want to have, what's the next thing that we're supposed to have is, let me just check inside our DB Connect. So it's event name, event time. So let's go to this. So we have event name, we have event time, event information, event venue. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to add that to our database. So we have to look at our address book. So, well, events book, events list. So what we have here at the moment is we have the option of, well, adding to the database. So what we want to do is want to do db dots, add events, and then want to pass in E1. And then once we pass in E1, the minute we add, we want to load our data. We'll come down to it, because once we add something new, we want to be able to load it from the start again. So we'll come back to that. We'll do that later on. So let's see, we have a toast dot make text. And then what we want to do is we want to pass in this toast here. So and then we want to say successfully added or successfully inserted. And then we want to do toast dot length short. And then we want to do dot short. Else, we do toast dot make text. And say, please click. Don't put anything there because it's not empty. So we'll just say that please click, or please click on the clear. Toast dot length short dot show. So what we've basically done here is we have just created, what we're doing is, first of all, when the person clicks on the button add, we want to get all the information in there, but we want to check to make sure that the person, number one, the person is not adding an event which already, well, the fields, the edit texts are all filled. We also want to make sure that they are not adding something that's already existing. So if an ID is there, it means that they're viewing something. If they're viewing something, they can't add the same thing to the database. It means that they're trying to duplicate it. So we want to make sure that, but it's that ID there that we're using to make sure. There are other checks that you can also do, but that is what I'm currently using to make sure. So this here should allow us to be able to add to our table. In the next video, we'll be working on the button update. And then we'll also be working on the button delete, and then we'll work on the button clear. So I'll see you in the next video.